Senator Sanders, it's a pleasure speaking to you, sir. I'm a senior citizen, and I'd like to know what movements or group of people I can join to reverse what's going on right now, to stop the Republicans in their tracks and reverse what's going on.
Thank you, Bill. Well, there are a number of strong senior groups out there. Some that come to mind are the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare, the Americans for Retirement Security, I think it's called now. There are a number of strong senior groups who are making it very clear, Bill, that Social Security, because it is funded by the payroll tax, has not contributed one nickel toward our deficit, and that it would be absolutely wrong to begin cutting back on Social Security. And that the idea of raising the eligibility age for Medicare, it's incomprehensible. I want people just to think, what happens to somebody who does not have a lot of money, and we're seeing more and more Americans who don't have a lot of money? What happens when you get to be 66 and you're dealing with cancer or some other terrible illness and you don't have Medicare? You think you're going to walk into a private insurance company and they're going to give you an affordable health care program? I don't think so. I don't think so. And Medicaid, we got 50 million people who have no health insurance today. We got 45,000 people die because they don't get to a doctor when they should. Cutting Medicaid, throwing children off the health insurance program, working families off, it is just not acceptable. So, Bill, there are some good and strong senior groups out there who are prepared to fight. The National Committee is one that I have worked with.
Nancy, in Batesville, Arkansas, you're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hello, Senator Sanders. I'm so pleased to be able to talk to you. My question is this new committee that they're coming up with, and we have this situation with some members of Congress that signed all these pledges. You know what I'm talking about.
I know.
Why can they not be disqualified for any committee to where they might have to break a pledge?
Well, Nancy, that's a great question. And I think what Nancy is talking about is that many of the Republicans have signed a pledge to Grover Norquist, who is a right-wing fella who is doing everything that he can to protect the wealthy and the powerful and not ask them to pay anything more in taxes. And what Nancy is asking, if these guys are appointed to the committee, how are they going to do the right thing for America and come up with some deficit reduction program which is fair? The answer, Nancy, is I think the Republican Speaker of the House, John Boehner, and the Republican Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, have made it very clear that is their belief as well. So anyone who thinks, I know sometimes you're hearing folks out there, well, we think we're going to be able to get some new revenue out of this committee. Maybe. I mean, no one can ever make a prediction. I don't want to speculate. But I think given the fact that the Republicans have said from day one, we're not going to raise taxes on the rich. They have carried that mantra through all of the fights, including this deficit reduction bill that was just signed on Tuesday. I have no reason to believe that they will support increased revenue coming from the wealthiest people in this country. So I would say, Nancy, it is very unlikely that you're going to end up with an agreement that is fair given the continued obstinance of the Republicans.
Teresa in Asheville, North Carolina. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Senator Sanders and Thom Hartmann are fresh air to breathe.
Thank you.
Listening to all this. My question is about privatization, and the Congress is, according to the Constitution, is supposed to take care of the business, not sort it out. And where is the facts? Where are the statistics? Where are the government studies that privatization is in any way profitable and economical to the American people that the government represents, that we should pay more for things through privatization than what we get from the government? Where is the studies to say that this is a good idea?
Well, that's a very good question, Teresa. I should tell you that I just last week, Jan Schakowsky of Illinois, a member of Congress, and I reintroduced legislation dealing with privatization issues in the military, where it is particularly offensive. because you have private contractors there, the people who are working for private contractors who are making substantially more money doing pretty much, in some cases, the same work that members of the United States Armed Forces are doing. And I think we waste a huge amount of money in that. I think, Tom, I don't know if you have discussed on your show a study done in New York City, where I guess New York City hired some firm to try to be cost effective, and it turned out that the private firm was ripping off the city there to the tune of tens and tens of millions of dollars. So bottom line is, I was a mayor, and we looked at this whole issue of privatization. And I think that in the vast majority of the cases, if you have good management, and you don't always do, and you have motivated public employees doing what they're supposed to be doing, your turnover will be less. People will see their jobs as careers, take responsibility, rather than privatization. So I'm not a great fan of privatization, I should tell you the reason.
Yeah, and this is why it's a good thing to have civil servants have pensions and a decent salary so that they'll stay in place.
And that's another issue, by the way, that I worry about a whole lot with these cutbacks on benefits and wages for public employees.
Yeah, very well said.
Against one candidate as they stand today. They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
He's everything you want. He's everything you need.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour. Senator Bernie Sanders on the line with us. Bernie, you're still here?
I do. Tom, and I
yes, sir.
I think it's important that everybody understand the clip that you just played. That was FDR?
Yes.
That was, 1936?
Yes, July 36.
Okay. And what that was about is this was the beginning of his campaign for a second term in which he won with a huge landslide. And in the middle of the Depression, he made it very clear which side he was on, that he was going to be on the side of the unemployed, the side of the people who were really hurting, and he was prepared to take on the big money interests that had driven the country into the ground. He made it very clear. And I think one of the problems that we're having today is that the American people are angry, they're frustrated, they're confused, they are angry at Congress, angry at the president, angry at Wall Street, angry at the media. There is no clarity out there as to what is going on. And we need leadership. We need the president to make it very clear that when you have a handful of multinational corporations, a big money interest in Wall Street, wreaking havoc on our economy, they have got to be taken on. And we're just not seeing that clarity right now.
Castle, watching us on Free Speech TV in Waterbury, Vermont. You're on the air with your senator, Senator Sanders.
Outstanding. Good afternoon, Senator Sanders. Hi, Tom. I'd like to ask you about the FEMA bailouts here in Vermont. I'm calling from Waterbury, Vermont State Hospital. My understanding is that yesterday was the lowest point in the stock market since September 1st, 2008. So I'm wondering if with the FEMA money, will there be growth here in Vermont?
Well, Castle, that's a very good question. I think, we had some serious flooding in the state of Vermont. I think the FEMA people did a good job working with the governor. I know the delegation did our best to make sure that Vermont got its fair share. But among all of the other programs that are out there that could be cut in the future, absolutely FEMA is one of them. So we are trying to do our best to make sure that Vermont gets its fair share to help the homes, the businesses, and the towns that were hit by our flooding. But I worry about FEMA in the future.
Andy, yes, in Redwood City, California. Andy, you're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hello, Senator Sanders.
Hi.
Hey, thank you for everything you do for us.
Thank you.
You're one of the only people working that actually represents working people. I want to talk about a article that came out in the Financial Times July 13th about free trade deals, and it talks about South Korea, Panama, and Colombia. And the Chamber of Commerce is saying that the deal with South Korea is going to create like 280,000 jobs. The White House says it's going to create 70,000 jobs to do the deal. And a think tank, Economic Policy Institute, says we will lose 159,000 jobs if we do the deal with South Korea. Now, in this same article, it indicates 55% of Americans from a Pew survey believe that free trade deals cost Americans jobs, and only 35% in the survey actually support free trade deals. When is Washington going to get it that these free trade deals are killing us, Bernie? They're killing our employment system. GATT, WTO, NAFTA, they're all killing us, and the Obama administration does not get it. They still think it's going to create jobs. And he's going to use that as a job creation program. This is insanity.
Andy, let me respond in this way. I agree with you, period. I've been through this. I used to be in the House, and I remember all of the large corporations in the Chamber of Commerce telling us how great NAFTA would be, and then they told us how great permanent normal trade relations with China would be, and how great CAFTA would be, and now how great these trade agreements would be. Look, it is harder and harder to buy products manufactured in the United States of America. And I've been working with the Smithsonian, I'm working with other government agencies to do their best, and we're having some success, to start buying American products. But here is the fact. I agree with Andy. We have year after year been running up huge trade deficits, especially with China. And this, Tom and Andy, is not just low-tech stuff. You know, we're not talking about sneakers and pants and shirts. We're increasingly talking about high-tech products. We are talking about also information technology, white-collar jobs, in addition to blue-collar jobs. But I believe Andy is right. The facts are that in the last 10 years, we've lost about 50,000 factories in the United States of America. Not all of them were connected to trade, but many of them were. And the reality is that if you're paying people pennies an hour in another country, it makes absolute sense for a company to shut down in America, pay pennies an hour, and then bring that product back into the United States of America. And you've seen that in virtually every single industry. We have a granite industry here in the state of Vermont. Granite is pretty heavy stuff. And yet China is bringing granite into this country because it is cheaper to transport the granite to make your monuments and so forth over there than it is to pay American workers a decent wage in this country. So I think if you look at major corporation after major corporation, they have downsized in the United States. Their job growth is in China and other developing countries. If the economy of this country is going to be, if our middle class is going to be saved, then we're going to see economic growth. I think we have to reverse that entire mentality about unfettered free trade.
David agreed. David in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Thank you very much, Senator Sanders. I saw a very interesting blog post by a guy named Blog Seska, who is saying that he's done some analysis of the debt deal bill and finds that because everything that this super Congress is going to do is rooted in the Government Accounting Office figures, that it assumes the expiration of the Bush tax cuts at the end of next year. I was wondering what your take on this was. Is that a fact as far as you know, or have you heard anything? And what implications are there with that? It may be a silver lining.
Well, David, here is when you deal with huge sums of money. This deficit reduction deal could be $2.5 trillion over a 10-year period. Other programs out there, Bull Simpson, were over $4 trillion, and so forth. Everything has to do with what is called the baseline, where you start from, and then it gets very, very tricky because you can have very honest differences as to what your baseline would be. One of the things that the CBO, probably more likely than the GAO, would estimate is that everything being equal, in another year, the Bush tax breaks for everybody, that's the wealthy and everybody, and the middle class, would expire, and that would mean that $4 trillion over a 10-year period would be coming in to the government. So that really stilts your analysis, because very few people believe that certainly for the middle class, which is over $3 trillion of that $4 trillion, very few people believe that politically those would disappear. So under the CBO calculations is the government will be getting over a 10-year period $4 trillion more because all of the tax breaks would expire. Politically, nobody thinks, or very few people think, that the middle-class tax breaks will be allowed to expire. Some of us, in fact, do want tax breaks for the upper-income people to expire, which would be about $700 billion. So depending on how you calculate that, it makes a heck of a lot of difference.
Jim in Summerdale, Ohio. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Yeah, good afternoon, Senator.
Hi, Jim.
Isn't it like your position or one of your jobs as a senator to make amendments to the Constitution? I don't know if that's right or not, but it seems to me that we need some amendments to the Constitution. One, to limit the Supreme Court judges' terms and how they are elected instead of appointed by the big business. And then two, also limit the terms of our, that would take the money out of the politics, wouldn't it? The big business would get out of it. And then limit the terms of the senators and congressmen so that the people do put them in and are elected to give us a fair chance. We have to do something. We're being sold out, and it's just a ruination.
We got it. Just a minute to the break here, Jim. Let's let Bernie answer.
Jim, we are being sold out in many respects, and you're absolutely right saying that money and the big money campaign contributions are probably at the root of most of the problems that we face. I'm not a great fan of term limits. People may say, well, that's self-serving. You're an elected official. I think if you have term limits and everybody goes, it is not going to guarantee a stronger or more progressive Congress. I think, Jim, the real solution is real campaign finance reform, and that means public funding of elections so that everybody has a fair shot at getting elected rather than being dependent upon big money.
Well said. And also with term limits, the only institutional memory that's left are the lobbyists because they're there from term to term.
They will have an increased degree of power.
Yeah, it increases their power.
It's too bad you're the only one in the whole body of Congress who speaks our language. But I want to know if peak oil has anything to do with the current global economic crisis. Because we've reached peak oil, it costs more to get it out of the ground than it used to, and it's a great big subject, and no political person ever speaks about it. But I go to meetings every week in the town hall of Limerick, Maine, and I hear about it every week. And that's the source of the giant problems going on today.
Well, Jen, let me tell you that, yes, I think the point you're making is right, that as oil becomes scarcer and harder to obtain, it becomes, and not only oil, but gas as well. From an environmental perspective, it gets worse and worse to exploit the oil, to dig for the oil. And furthermore, it becomes more expensive. So I think there is no question to my mind that we have to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel and oil in particular to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. And I want to give you some good news, Jane, and listeners out there. I know there's not a lot of good news, but I was just on the phone day before yesterday with a bunch of people who are active in the solar thermal area, concentrated solar energy. Many people are not aware that right now there are many plants that are being developed based on solar energy, which are utility scale, that will be located in the southwest of this country, California, Nevada, Arizona, which have the capability, and we're going to see one that's already begun construction, which can produce electricity for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of homes. One plant using the sun as its source of energy. I think if we invest in that technology, if we move toward energy efficiency, if we take advantage of geothermal, of wind, of biomass, we can break our dependence on Mideast oil, and that's terribly important from a geopolitical point of view. In the long run, with new technology, I think we can substantially lower the cost of these new technologies and obviously cut back substantially on greenhouse gas emissions. So, Jane, I think that peak oil gives us the impetus to be more aggressive in terms of sustainable energy. And I'm happy to say, I've been critical of the Obama administration in a number of areas, but we are beginning in this area to make some progress. And I think the potential there is huge.
And it's not just the Southwest. Our mutual friend Hal Cohen lives in a house in Vermont that's completely off the grid.
No, absolutely. You can do solar anywhere in America. And in Vermont, where I help bring in some money in Vermont, we're doing solar here. We're doing it all over America. But in the Southwest, you have really optimal solar exposure, and we can make some real progress there as well.
Yeah, it's crazy not to be using that.
Yeah, hi, Tom and Bernie. Thanks, you guys, for all the work you do, and thanks, Senator Sanders, for voting against that debt ceiling thing. You guys rock. Anyway, I'm a postal retiree, and I'd like to know how this new poison pill we're getting is going to affect the old CSRS retirement system.
Good question.
Any ideas on that one?
That's a good question. I don't have all of the information in front of me. The issue here is to what degree it will impact, if at all, those who are already retired. Probably the more pertinent question is, what does it do for people who have been working for the federal government for 20, 25 years, and what happens to their retirement benefits? There is a lot of discussion about not only the existing freeze that we'll have for a couple of years on the wages of federal employees, but also asking them, current employees, to pay more for their retirement. And what upsets me about all of that is this is part of the Republican effort to go after public employees to say, and doing that, it is going to discourage, I think, good people from wanting to get into public employment. And God knows we need the best and the brightest to be working in all areas of government. And second of all, it plays off private. It leads us to the race to the bottom. And what the line is, gee, these public employees have all of these benefits and you don't have it in the private sector. The answer is to make sure that our private sector employees have decent benefit programs, which, by the way, have been cut drastically in recent years. So rather than proceed to a race to the bottom, we want to protect what the public employees have, which are, in some cases, decent middle-class benefits, and make sure that the private sector gets it, rather than take away what the public sector workers have.
Charles in Portland, Oregon, you're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Good morning, Tom. Good morning, Senator Sanders. Pleasure to speak with both of you, and a definite shout-out from Tom Dwyer Automotive in Portland. You got a lot of fans here for both of you.
Oh, good on Tom Dwyer, a regular advertiser in KPOJ. What's up, Charles?
I was curious, with the Super Congress coming up here and everything, what are the chances of getting Senator Sanders on the team for that? I mean, has it already been picked, or it's been picked and not announced, or can we get Senator Sanders, somebody in our corner out there on that budget team?
Well, Charles, thank you very much, and I understand. I read somewhere there's a petition going around which would ask that some of the more progressive members of the House and the Senate be put on that committee, including myself, Raul Grijalva, and some others. And I think that would be great. I would love to be on that committee. Whether it will happen or not, I'm not quite so sure. But certainly, thank you for asking. I would love to be on that committee.
Bernice in Santa Fe, New Mexico, listening on AM 1260. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hello, Senator Sanders. Well, that's part of what I wanted to do, of course. I want to nominate you to be on the Super Congress Committee. But I also have some recommendations. I think that, we're not very good, we Democrats or independents, about messaging, and Tom's a big advocate for this, but we need a great PR campaign to advertise that we're going to do a lot of tax cuts and tax breaks for American companies. We're going to cut taxes for all Americans that earn under $250,000. And, of course, we're not going to do anything about the expiring Bush cuts, in January for above that. We can have a tax amnesty for 1 year for American companies to return from overseas, and after the first year, they're taxed as under Clinton or Reagan, except that there'll be a new law where they'll get a slight tax break only for employees who are employed within the U.S. borders. And then we can finally relieve a big burden by providing health care. We can relieve them of that burden by providing Medicare for all. And, I think we just need to advertise this.
Well, I agree with you, Bernice, that we need, what you're really talking about is you need a progressive agenda, which is simple, which is straightforward, which will have a real impact on the lives of ordinary Americans, and an agenda that people can understand. And I agree. The difficulty, to be frank with you, is that not everybody in the Democratic caucus will agree with what you say. I believe in a Medicare for All program. That's called the single-payer program. I hope the state of Vermont will lead the nation in that direction. But I will tell you that in the United States Senate, there are probably not more than 5, 10 max senators who would agree with that. I agree very strongly in terms of figuring out a way, whatever that way may be, to demand that corporations in this country who have been laying off millions of American workers start reinvesting in America rather than in China. And there are all ways to do that. The American people want that to happen. Right now, insanely, you have tax policies which virtually encourage companies to shut down in America and go abroad. That is absolutely insane. And that gets back to the trade policies that a previous caller talked about. So Bernice's point that we need to be simple, straightforward, progressive, have ideas that make sense to ordinary people and carry them forward. I agree with that assertion.
Bernie, wasn't there, we just have about 50 seconds left here, not enough time to bring in another caller, but wasn't there legislation that was passed out of the House by Nancy Pelosi in the last legislative session that essentially did that trade, not changed our trade laws, but that ended the tax break for companies that shut down factories here and gave them a tax benefit if they brought factories back? And it got filibustered by the Republicans in the Senate?
Can't swear to you. That sounds right. I won't swear to you because I don't.
I'm quite sure there was. I would be willing to swear to that. So.
Right, but this is an issue. This whole issue about globalization, and the point that I think it was Andy earlier in the show made, the American people understand that our current policy of unfettered free trade hasn't worked. But read the editorials of every major paper in America, hear from the Chamber of Commerce, and for all the corporate leaders, they will tell you how great unfettered free trade is. Well, it may be good for the big money interest. It is not good for working people.